Hey, everybody, welcome back. It is the Razzball Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I am Beaton, joined by the Fantasy Master Lothario, Gray Albright. How's it going over there, Gray?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Can you see my sweatshirt? It's me inside of a boba cup. It's a dream. It's a dream. If you can't see it because this is an audio medium for for most of you, you can watch us on YouTube. But you do what you do. Okay.
Absolutely, you can watch us on YouTube. We're out there if that's how you want to watch us. See any reactions or funny things that happen on the podcast, or look at Gray's hoodie or my beautiful Raz Slam T-shirt. And you can't see because it's all black and red, and I'm against a black and red background, so it's basically like might as well not be wearing a shirt. But that's okay. It does say Raz Slam on it, which, by the way, if you're interested in joining the Raz Slam, I'm pretty sure your time to sign up is coming to a close it is coming up. So you do need to go ahead and get signed up if you're looking for that. RCLs actually should be posted up by the time you listen to this podcast, along with I am running the podcast league, along with my own head-to-head categories when Beat On's Money League. So if you wanted any of that, go ahead out to Razzball, sign up. If you wanted my leagues, message me on Twitter at RazBeaton. Come find me out there. Let's go ahead and get into shortstops, though, Gray.
Let's do it.
All right, 1 through 4 we have already talked about. That is Bobby Witt Jr., Mookie Betts, Trey Turner, and Francisco Lindor. They were in the top 20 podcast. If you want to hear about them, you can go listen to that one. We are moving on to the next tier, though, and that is Corey Seager. He is sitting here in a tier by himself. 119 games last year, 33 home runs, 2 stolen bases, 88, 96, 327 average. You have him projected for 33 home runs, 3 stolen bases, 96, 109, and a 310 average, and 533 at-bats. ADP is right around 20. He's shown 21% home run fly ball last year. He's done that now twice. Corey Seager's great when he's on the field, Gray.
I just I just went. I just scrolled down to the comments because Corey Seager was one of those guys who got. I got a bunch of comments about my ranking of Corey Seager. People felt like I was too low on him. So I scrolled down into the comments just now, and the first comment I saw was someone asking, "Where is O'Neal Cruz? He is better than a lot of the guys on this list." And then someone responded, "In your mama's room." It's really
God, I love Razzball.
just like, okay.
I could probably put like 2 or 3 guesses together as to who that was, too, and probably get that one right.
In your mama's room. Anyway, it doesn't matter who was commenting about Corey Seager. There were quite a few comments that I was too low on him. And my general feeling on that was, by the way, this was from a couple weeks ago when I posted the shortstops and people were commenting that I was too low on them. And my general take on the people asking like why Corey Seager was so low was, hey, are we sure he's going to be able to stay healthy? And most people were like, are you dumb? hey, Gray, are you stupid? Of course he's going to stay healthy. Don't be stupid. I hate when you're so stupid. And since then, Corey Seager's already hurt himself. Somehow he's hurt himself, like when he's doing absolutely nothing. I mean, he's not even playing baseball, and he's hurting himself. So yeah, I mean, come on, guys. I mean, we've been here before. I'm not saying Corey Seager can't be valuable. Like, that's not my point. I still have him ranked 5th overall for shortstops, so I still think he can be valuable. But you have to take at least 25 to 30 games off of his line, just off the top. Like, and that's not even counting the hernia injury that he already has. So I would say, I might even be high on him right now because of the hernia injury. Like, people, it's funny. Like, this is a ongoing thing for drafters, just in general. Like everyone is, so hypersensitive to the slightest bit of news. Like everyone hears about the Corey Seager hernia injury, and now he's getting drafted like 10 picks after. He was going at 19 overall. Now I believe his ADP is 28 overall since the hernia news. So it's like everyone is just so hypersensitive to like the smallest bit of news. It's like, oh, so and so is throwing a new pitch, bumping him up like 2 rounds. Oh, this guy has a sore quad, dropping him 3 rounds. It's like, guys, like it's a long season. There's really no reason to overreact to news in February. Will Corey Seager play 162 games? No, but he never was going to play 162 games. Is the hernia injury bad for his health outlook? Not really. I mean, it's the same story. If it wasn't going to be a hernia injury in February, there was going to be something in March anyway. It's like at some point there was going to be something with Corey Seager. So, once you take away his 20 or 30 games that he's not going to play, I still think he's probably worth around a top 25 overall pick. As the 5th shortstop, I have no problem taking him here still, even though he's got the hernia injury. Everything looks great. I wish he were, I wish he had some steals in his line. So he's a little bit over reliant on his counting stats and homers and average, but he's good in those categories. So, he is what he is. I don't mind Corey Seager at a certain price. I just feel like, the people, he's definitely, I would say this, he's probably even more valuable in a 12-team or shallower mixed league, or really any shallow league where, especially daily leagues, like if he gets, if he has like a day-to-day injury on a Monday and he's out till, Friday, then you can switch him out pretty easily in a shallower daily league. Whereas like in a weekly league, yeah, I mean, you take a little bit of a hit, but I think at the end of the year, he's still going to be a top 30 overall guy when we go back and look at his overall numbers, because he's good when he's on the field. And, he's not always on the field, but he's good when he's on the field. He kind of reminds me in that respect, he's probably he's like a little bit younger Mike Trout in some ways. Like, 30 homers, good counting stats, should be solid for average, won't steal much anymore. And is likely going to have an injury or two.
Yep, that's I mean, that all seems fair to me. 33 home runs last year in 119 games is the same number of home runs he had in the previous season in 151. Some of that could be the ball. We know that it's adjusting year to year, and at least presumably we think the ball was a little bouncier last year than it was in 22. So that may cause some of that adjustment. So, I'm sure some people are projecting like 150 games, and he had 33 and 119. So that means he's going to hit like 42 and 150. I think we're just being very careful about projecting any more than kind of, trying to project out from what he did last year. I think like 30 home runs, good average is probably what you're looking for, even minus the game. So I think it's easy, fine. He is a guy that I never own because he does lack speed, because of the injury history. I never seem to own him. He just goes way before I feel comfortable taking him.
Yeah,
Speaking
and
of,
it's also like kind of funny in regards to like the overreactions to his injury with ADP dropping 10 spots. Like last year, like you mentioned, his at bats, 477 at bats last year in 119 games. So that's 43 games missed. So if you were to say, Corey Seager is going to miss 43 games, this. Like if you know that, where are you taking him in drafts? It's like, well, last year he was the 21st guy on the player rater for value. right below Adalis Garcia. So it's like, he did that last year already. Like it's like even in 119 games and 477 at bats, he still produced. So it's like you're dropping him in drafts because of an injury that happened at the end of January or beginning of February, whenever it happened. But still, it's like, why? What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, did you really think he was going to play 162 games, and that's why you were drafting him at 19 overall? Because the people who are drafting him at 19 overall, he ended up at 21 overall at the end of last year on the player rater. So it's like, what are you guys doing, man? Why are you so panicked about an injury in February? Like you should have been panicked the whole time you were drafting him. If that was like, if you were worried about injuries, did you not think he was going to be injured? And if you did think he was going to be injured, who cares? Because he's always good, even when he's injured. Anyway, it's starting to get crazy. Let's move
We're
on.
just gonna move on. We've discussed Corey Seager enough. Let's go ahead to the next tier. This is another guy I don't own very often, and that is Bo Bichette. If you are a listener of the podcast, you know this already. Last year, in 135 games, he had 20 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 69, 73, and a 306 average. You have projected for 26 home runs, 13 stolen bases, 92, 81, and a 295 average. Gray, this is your guy. Bo Bichette's always been your guy.
My
I never own him. I just don't. I got a lot of hate for where I had him ranked in my initial early rankings. I have moved him up some, but still a lot lower than this.
I'm wearing my Boba sweatshirt, so you know where I stand with my man Bo Bichette. I was just looking. When you're speaking, I was looking at the steals per team last year because it did feel to me like the the memo about the pitch clock rules and being able to steal, it hadn't quite reached Canada yet. So I was looking to see if John Schneider, the Blue Jays manager, had heard that people can steal a lot easier now to generate runs. I wasn't sure. So the Blue Jays were 22nd out of 30 teams last year with 99 steals. The teams below them, mix of good and bad. So it's like, I don't know. It just, I guess the way the team is built more than anything on whether or not people took advantage of the pitch clock rules. I don't know if there's really any takeaways there. I will say though, with Bo Bichette, so I bumped up his steals projections from what he did last year. 5 steals last year, 13 steals the year before. I haven't projected for 13 steals. I think that's kind of where we're going to have to, it's like steals with the pitch clock and him. Will he steal more? I think so. It's like, it's really hard to say yes or no. Like, it's not like he's necessarily the fastest guy in the league. It's kind of a matter of whether he wants to steal. So me saying he's going to steal 13 bags, do I have a real reason for that? Well, I mean, he's young, and last year he had a quad injury. So, I mean, assuming his quad is better and he's healed up for last year, I'm guessing he's going to be able to steal more. But it is, I mean, I am a bit, it is a bit of a guess. And everyone, in fairness to me, all the projections are saying he's going to steal more. Because honestly, it'd be hard for him to steal less. It's kind of insane that he only stole 5 bags last year, and he was caught 3 times. I mean, he's really not good on the base paths. He's not great. He got caught 8 times in the year he stole 13 bags. So, I mean, that could also be playing into it of why he didn't steal last year. Because, I mean, maybe John Schneider was like, "You're a terrible base runner. Stop stealing." on base a lot. He's going to hit for a good average. He should hit for, 25-ish homers. I think that's fairly neutral on luck. Towards the top of the lineup, 90 runs, 25 homers, 75-ish RBIs, 290-ish average, which actually would be below his career. His career average is 299. So, even 295 and 10-ish steals. I mean, that's really like it's not that dramatically different than what you're with Corey Seager. I mean, Corey Seager has a bit more power, same kind of everything else, except for steals. So, like if you're looking at Corey Seager versus Bo Bichette, it's like Bo Bichette has like 5 less homers, 6, 7 less homers in that range, but he has potentially 10 plus more steals. That is a little bit where the risk is involved with Bo Bichette, obviously, because he's had years where he didn't steal a lot. I mean, if you go back to 2021, he did steal 25 bags and it was only caught once. So I don't know. And I don't from 2 years ago, I don't think he's slowed up that much. He's still only, 25 years old. I don't know. I obviously like Bichette more than you. I will admit to having, not like not the firmest of grounds to stand on when I'm saying what his steals projections are, but I do think he could do it. Hopefully.
Yep, really glad that you're paying up for shortstop Ketel Marte. That's great stuff, Gray. I'll explain this to you. I'll explain why his steals have dropped. In 2021,
wait a second though. Ketel Marte is not. I mean, Bo
right?
Bichette
Ketel
is
Marte's
more.
better.
Bo Bichette is more or less a neutral 300 hitter. Ketel Marte is not that. I mean, come on. And Bo Bichette, by the way, it does that in like 600 plate appearances. I mean, he's really good for your average. Like, let's not shortchange him completely.
Yeah, great. He's really good for your average. That's phenomenal, Gray. That's
Well,
great.
with that comes runs and
Ketel Marte.
RBIs too. I mean, it's not like that comes completely empty. It's also, I think, Bo Bichette has more power than Ketel Marte. I mean, come on, let's not bring up
Does
Ketel
he?
Marte anymore, please. Let's
Ketel
find someone
Marte,
else to compare everyone to.
player rater 59. Bo Bichette 106. Just saying, Gray. Just saying here. Okay, so the reason the speed's gone or the steals are gone is because the speed's gone. In 2021, he was at 28 feet per second. That was when he stole 25, was caught once. In 2021 or in 2022, he dropped a full half second off that feet per second. That's a big deal to lose a half foot per second when it's a second. That's why he went 13-8. He dropped another half second last year, which is why he went 5-3. He's not, barring the Blue Jays just becoming a running team and him being okay, him being caught 50% or more of the time, he's not going to run a lot more. I don't see it. The launch angle is awful, Gray. The launch angle is down to like 6.2. He's not lifting the ball. The first 2 months were amazing. He had 11 home runs, Gray. He hit 9 home runs the rest of the season. He was a 14.5% K rate those first 2 months, a 22% after that. The slugging didn't get above 500 after those first 2 months. The home run, the fly ball dropped. Like everything looked awful after those first 2 months. Like
So you're
it
saying,
was,
so you're saying if he falls a little bit, you would draft him. Is what you're saying.
he has to fall quite a bit, I think, based on the fact that he's going off the board at like 30, 35, I think, somewhere in that range. Yeah, I don't understand. I don't understand the Bo Bichette. Like you're paying up for average and counting numbers, which are great. They're great things to have. Don't get me wrong. But with limited power, no steals, and didn't even put up the counting numbers last year. Like that's the problem with counting numbers. If you don't get them, that player all of a sudden isn't as valuable. Like it's something out of their control completely. All right.
He had something like the worst hard contact too, or something. I don't.
It wasn't good, Gray.
There's other problems,
Yeah,
but I
there's a
do
lot
like
of
I
problems.
do think he's pretty good.
But Gray is still expecting everything to get better. Just know that, everybody. He's still expecting everything to get better. He's going to steal more, hit more home runs, hit for a lot more counting numbers. Yeah, okay. Who's crazy here? Number
Okay.
7, Gunnar Henderson. Last year had 28 home runs, 10 stolen bases, a hell of a lot better than what you got from Mr. Bo Bichette. 100 runs, 82 RBIs, 255 average. You project for 26 home runs, 11 stolen bases, 106, 71, and a 257 average. I will 100% take Mr. Henderson over Mr. Bichette. We can bet that one if you want.
Uh, no, because they're in the same tier, so
Okay. I'll find somebody in the next
it's
tier.
splitting hairs, kind of. I like Gunnar Henderson, so I don't want to. It's like I don't want to be the guy who's going against Gunnar Henderson because I like him. I agree with I do think like there's something to like if you look at Gunnar Henderson though and you look at Bo Bichette. I don't want to do this. The whole podcast talking about Bo Bichette.
This is
But
it. This is the
if
guy. I've
you
already
do
identified
look
him.
at them, like if you look at them, like and you just compare like what Gunnar Henderson, so say like 25 homers, like if you're just looking at their projections, 25 homers, the runs and RBIs are going to be what they're going to be. Steals, like Gunnar Henderson's good for like 10 steals. So 25-10, and then you look at his average, Bo Bichette is going to beat Gunnar Henderson by like 40 points an average. Just saying. Just saying. I don't want to be taking any bets about Gunnar Henderson being less valuable than Bo Bichette. I'm just saying that, I mean, Bo Bichette probably would be more valuable.
Gunner 56 again on the player rater. Bo Bichette somewhere in the hundreds. After Gray hands Bo Bichette 8 more home runs and 10 more steals for no reason at all, he's better than Gunnar Henderson, guys.
Okay, so
Actually,
yeah,
so
I mean,
actually,
also the Jays were historically bad last year for like counting stats. Like everyone was like Vlad had a bad, like everyone just had a really off year. It was a fluky, unlucky year for the Jays.
and
Not
they addressed it by
not a
signing
Jays.
Justin Turner.
I'm not a Jays fan. So yeah, I mean, I think with Gunnar Henderson, everything he looks like he could take the jump into the I see I do like Gunnar Henderson. Like he looks like he could take that leap into like the top 20 for next year, being like one of the a guy who's top 20 overall, I mean. So I would say his his hard hit looks good. His homer per fly ball has always been nice. Nice launch angle. I would say his power, like unfortunately, Camden stinks for power, even though he's a lefty, so that doesn't hurt him as much. But obviously, if he tries to go the opposite way, it's a lot harder to hit a home run. But as a lefty, he shouldn't be hurt as much, but it's still going to hurt him a little bit. I would say, if he were in like Yankee Stadium, I probably would already put him as a top 20 overall guy. It's just Camden kind of hurts his power a little bit, so I have him where I have him in the rankings. But I like him a lot. Like I would totally draft him. I will probably draft him, hopefully at some point. So yeah, I'm a fan.
Yeah, I love me some Gunnar Henderson. And you said that, Bichette's kind of locked for more points than average, and I would actually disagree with that. Second half last year, we saw Gunnar Henderson make the adjustment. He cut his K rate 9%. First half, second half. First half, second half, he had 246 versus 264. So you're saying, okay, so he adjusted, he had 264. 264 was with a 34-point drop in his BABIP. So you just give him half of that from the first half. All of a sudden, he's a 280 hitter. And we're not really talking about much of an average drop
Yeah,
here.
no, it could
So
be. No, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's possible. I think Gunnar Henderson, like a good comp, would probably be like what we've seen from Paul Goldschmidt for like a decade. Like the 35, 15, 290 type year.
that
Absolutely.
I think that's the right kind of like profile for him and what he's going to give you. Next up is C.J. Abrams. Last year he went 18 home runs, 47 stolen bases, 83, 64, and 245. You project for 18 home runs, 52 stolen bases, 90, 59, and 251. I absolutely love me some CJ Abrams Gray. Somebody's going to have to talk me off of him because otherwise I'm going to have him just everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, no, same. I I think I have CJ Abrams like a good, I want to say 20 to 30 points higher in my overalls than I in my overalls. Hey, what's he doing in my overalls? In my overall rankings, I have him much higher, I think, than his ADP. I think people are down on CJ Abrams, maybe. I don't know why though. I can't figure it out. Like, I'm the wrong person to ask because I'm absolutely in on CJ Abrams. Oh no, I stand corrected. I just looked at ADP. He's going about where I have him ranked. So yeah, that's ignore everything I was saying. Yeah, no, I think CJ Abrams has got like, so I think I wrote a sleeper post for him. I want to say last year. Yeah, I did. I wrote a CJ Abrams sleeper post because I was like, he's got 50 steal speed. Great. Hello. Like that. And he's also got 15 plus homer power. 1550. He's like, I feel like he's making a case for the top 20, except he's a terrible team. He's on a terrible team, so his counting stats are absolutely going to suffer a little bit. Not as bad as like, I wouldn't say they're as bad as the A's, but they're not much better. And his average is a little bit middling. I have him for 251. I could see anywhere as high as like, maybe 265 because his speed is so good. That will help with his BABIP. And last year his BABIP was a little bit low. He had a 279 BABIP. He's probably more like a 295 BABIP guy. Like, unfortunately, he does hit the ball in the air a lot, which is, not terrible because he has some power, so he can hit some homers. So it's not like the worst thing in the world, but it does hurt his average a little bit. The fact that he's hitting the ball in the air and it's not always like the hardest of contact. So, but I like him a lot. I mean, like I said, like 15 homers, 50 steals. Sign me up, man. Everywhere. I'm all in.
Yeah, I absolutely love him. You mentioned him as a top 20 player potentially. That's actually where I have him is inside my top 20. So I absolutely love CJ Abrams. I'm going to have a lot of shares. So if he flops, that's going to hurt me in my teams quite a bit. But I love him. I do think there's room for him to improve on average. As you mentioned, BABIP was low. It was only a 261 BABIP in the second half when he hit 246, despite dropping his K rate and raising his walk rate. So I definitely think there's some room for improvement in the
He's
average.
definitely he's a candidate for like a high BABIP too, because he does, like you mentioned with his strikeouts, he does make a lot of contact. So there's a good chance that like he could have a lucky BABIP year where he has a high average just because he gets a little bit lucky. Like, I would say he's got more of a chance of being lucky than unlucky, even though last year he was unlucky. Unfortunately, he does hit the ball a little bit on the weaker side, so that could hurt the BABIP a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it's there's a chance here though. I mean, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to point out that Rudy's projection has him at 263, which is, when Rudy does projections, generally averages and normalizes BABIP. So just in Rudy's own projection, he has him up to 263. That's closer to where I have him as far as average goes. I don't really expect him to hit 245 again. I would expect that to climb some at least.
He's
But
also like for the lineup. The lineup may not be great, but he's like in a situation where it's interesting because the top of the lineup's not bad. So if he's hitting leadoff, he's in a good situation where it's like no one's going to be on base with him, so he can get on base and run, and then the people behind him can drive him in because he does have decent bats behind him with Lane Thomas, Ruiz, and Meneses. So it's interesting that like the spot he is in the lineup, it's kind of not a great lineup, but he's kind of in a good spot in it.
Yeah, you could definitely put up some runs. The rest, I don't know if the RBI number may be a little bit low, just where he's hitting and how that bottom of the lineup looks. But yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of great things to come for Mr. Abrams, and you do too. I'm just being maybe overly optimistic and having him in my top 20. But hey, you rank your players and you go for them. Next tier, 9 was Matt McLean, which we talked about in second base. Nico Horner at 10, who we also talked about in second base. All right, so number 11 is Odell Cruz. Last year, he played less than 10 games, so not really going to bring up those stats, but you have projected for 25 home runs, 25 stolen bases, 82, 64, and a 248 average. And Gray, you might be the only person in the entire world that has O'Neill over Ellie in the Battle of the Cruzes.
Right. Yeah. I think it's like this is one of the most puzzling things for me where like, because O'Neill Cruz, we could just throw out last year. Like you didn't even mention the stats. He only played 9 games. Like it was just a lost year. It's just so weird to me that everyone has just like, not that they've taken that year and they've made like it into a negative rather than just ignoring it like that. There's no reason why, like, he last year's ADP for him was around 50 overall, and now people are taking him around 80 overall, so he's lost 30 spots in ADP and in enthusiasm, I will say, because I'm correlating those two. So he's lost 30 spots in enthusiasm for no reason whatsoever. Like he didn't do anything last year. Like everything that you loved about O'Neill Cruz going into last season, it's still there. Nothing's happened. It was a fluke injury. There's nothing, like, it's not like he bottomed out. He didn't have a bad year. He had no year. There was nothing there. So so then it's like you look at going into last year and the enthusiasm you had for last year where you thought he was going to be a 25-25 guy in the top of the Pirates. The Pirates aren't the greatest team, but that doesn't matter. Like all the enthusiasm for O'Neill Cruz, like the fact that he cut his strikeout rate in September of 2022, the fact that he was like, hitting bombs, hitting 117 mile per hour line drives, like all of that enthusiasm, it's still there for me. I haven't forgotten it. I still completely think O'Neill Cruz is like, I just think he's just a matter of playing 150 plus games and he's going to be a top 25 overall guy. Like this year, I think O'Neill Cruz right now is like one of the, like, value wise, one of the best picks in the draft. I can't believe he's going as low as he's going. And I think it's just a matter of like, people just forget things. I don't know why. Like it's some drafters, it feels like it's like a short-term memory thing. Like if, like I forget, like, something in the car, I come in and I greet Ted, my dog, and he's like excited to see me. And then I go out to the car because I forgot something and I come back in. Ted thinks like he greets me like I haven't been around for 3 years. It's all his short-term memory is about the same as like some of these drafters who are forgetting about O'Neill Cruz. I don't get it necessarily, but it's more value for us. I say, like, grab him everywhere.
Yeah, I agree with grab him everywhere. And in regards to his value, I think, I have O'Neill Cruz high in my rankings. I have Ellie over him, but I like both of them. I guess you say nothing's changed. I mean, the fact he didn't play last year because of ankle surgery is the reason he didn't play last year. So that's the concern. And you mentioned the team. Ellie is on what may be like a top 5 offense, and O'Neill is on what may be a bottom 10 offense. So there are some, differences here in regards to, what we're looking at. I agree, that they should be probably fairly close because I think from a skill set, like they're very similar in their ability to hit the ball hard and have that loud power, along with having ridiculous speed. Like they both have it. So I really, from a skill set, there's not much. And I'll take the guy who was healthy, last year playing versus the guy who didn't play, had ankle surgery, and has to kind of get back into baseball. That's for me the reason I have Ellie
You
over him. But I
can't. I
completely
mean, you
understand.
can't be quote. You can't be quoting splits for like Bo Bichette and Gunnar Henderson and all these other guys, and not look at Ellie De La Cruz and be like,
Well, we
"This
haven't
is gonna.
gotten Ellie. I
This is
haven't
gonna
gotten there yet.
this is gonna be a mess." Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, because you're comparing them. So go ahead. But go ahead. Talk about
All right,
Ellie,
we're
please.
moving on. All right, great. We're moving on. We're moving on to Ellie. We're going to talk about him now. So number 12 is sitting in his own tier because he's just that good. He gets his own. Last year, he had 13 home runs, 35 stolen bases, 67, 44, and hit 235. You have him projected for 20 home runs, 50 stolen bases, 68, 72, and 219 average. Yes, he hit the ground running. He was amazing, and then not so much uh, to be very fair to him closing out the season. Um, but he's a rookie. That happens. You struggle and you bounce back. That's what I would say about that. It's not as though O'Neill Cruz has shown amazing discipline and huge average as well. So we were kind of banking on average improving from both of them.
Yeah, but O'Neill Cruz already showed it though. He showed it in September
Do you
when
really want to see what he did the first 3 months before September,
No,
though?
I know, but his trajectory was getting better,
You
not
had a
getting
good
worse.
September against prospect or against terrible
Ellie
pitching,
De La
and that
Cruz,
matters.
Ellie O'Neill Cruz had a 25.7% strikeout rate in Double A. Ellie De La Cruz had a 30.9% strikeout rate in Double A. I mean, Ellie De La Cruz is going to be a mess. Let's be honest. He's not going to. He's going to bottom out so fast. And honestly, it's kind of surprising me because I look at his numbers and I see kind of like I see CJ Abrams basically. Like I see, his projections. I have him for 20 homers and 50 steals. I have CJ Abrams for 18 homers and 52 steals. So I see the correlation there, and I think back as to like my feelings about CJ Abrams going into last year, and I saw the power and the speed coming, and I was like, oh, that's a sleeper. That's good, and he can make contact. That's good. And then I see Ellie De La Cruz, and then I see Ellie De La Cruz, and I'm like, he's not going to make contact. There's no way. I mean, he's a mess. He hit 191 in the second half. I have him projected for 219. He might be lucky to hit over 200. I mean, it's like Ellie De La Cruz is going to be on so many teams that just like bottom out completely. And they're like, whoa, he's good for like one game a week. And then the other games, I mean, I'm sure he's gonna have highlights. I wouldn't be shocked to see LA De La Cruz have like, yeah, I mean, I just think that LA De La Cruz is not gonna be like a guy that you're gonna have highlights for sure. You're gonna have situations where you're like, oh, I'm so glad I have him, and he's gonna be fun to watch. But he's gonna strike out so much that I kind of feel like I'm surprised at myself for being the one who's so low on Ellie De La Cruz versus everyone else when it looks so obvious. Like he looks like a really obvious fade to me. So I'm kind of shocked that he's still getting drafted so high. And I mean, there's always going to be one person in every league that believes. So that keeps, that'll keep his ADP up high, I guess. But yeah, I'm surprised, honestly, because I really didn't think I was the one who's like the one who put on the brakes on an exciting player. That shouldn't be me.
That's you, Grape. You're the boring old guy now. Congratulations, old grump. Thanks for ruining our fun. I will say I'm talking Ellie up, and I do have him over O'Neill. I think their average struggles are pretty much even. I don't really buy into, well, O'Neill hit 280 for a month, and that means he's clearly figured it out a year and a half ago. When he come back from surgery, hasn't played baseball, has to get acclimated. I will take Ellie in that scenario. They both have huge strikeout problems. I think you're underselling O'Neill Cruz's massive strikeout issues. So I don't think O'Neill's any safer. I think you're gambling on both. All that said, Ellie going off the board at like 20 is too early for me. I love Ellie De La Cruz, but he does have huge gaps in his profile that could go bad. I'm willing to take that upside risk, but more in like the 30s or 40 range. If he goes in the top 20, I'm unfortunately not going to have many because there's enough warning signs that people are just ignoring. And I admit it, even though we just had this conversation. Moving on to the next tier, which is Xander Bogaerts. We went from two of the most exciting players in all of baseball, potentially, to Xander Bogaerts. He went 19 home runs, 19 stolen bases, 83, 58, and hit 285 last year. You have him down for 18 home runs, 20 stolen bases, 94, 61, and a 297 average. This is the award for fantasy value saved by pitch clock at shortstop, Xander Bogaerts.
Yeah, he's actually his splits are kind of hilarious because it's like he plays in April, then takes 4 months off, and then plays again in September, which is not that's not usually it's weird to see splits in that way. So yeah, I don't know. That doesn't mean that's neither here nor there really. Just something I've noticed with him in general. Yeah, I don't really like Xander Bogaerts. But I also, I mean, it's hard to like Bogaerts really, like as a for fantasy because he is really kind of boring. But at the end of the year, it's like those middle months and those months when he's not doing anything from like May through August that he becomes like just like eh. But also, I mean, he stays, relatively healthy for his whole career. He does what he does. It's like he's not necessarily the most fun player to own in fantasy, but like at the end of the day, he probably is going to be a top 90 overall guy on the player rater because he's going to give you, you know, 17 to 20 homers, 17 to 20 steals, decent enough counting stats, even though the Padres will be a little bit worse this year, but he'll be hitting at the top of the lineup and he stays on the field, like I said. So not exciting, but also around a top 85-ish pick.
I would agree. He's just a value guy. He's depending on the league, like he may get drafted early because of name value, or he may drop because of name value. It just kind of depends on the league that you're in. But he's just a solid fantasy asset. He's going to give you, a little bit of everything. And honestly, I don't. I know the Padres lost a very very nice piece in their lineup, but I don't know if they can be as bad as they were last year. Like it feels like they're another one of the teams that's due for at least a little bit of correction, despite as bad as it looked last year. And I will say this is kind of the cutoff. I know we got to 12 at LA De La Cruz, and you're like, oh, we got 12 at shortstop. Like I feel like there's a big overall ranking gap from Ellie De La Cruz in general, like the top 12 shortstops in general, and then moving down to what we're talking about. Like even back to like CJ Abrams, who came in at 8 for you, he's like a top 40, top 50 player. in the overall. So shortstop's very heavily weighted in the top. So also take that into consideration when we're going through this ranking. You're like, oh well, you have Abrams 8. That's just, you don't like him that much. Just realize that in the overall, he's still ranked very highly. But yeah, let's move on from Xander Bogaerts. 14 was Tyro Estrada, and 15 is Anthony Volpe. Tyro Estrada we talked about in second base. Volpe last year had 21 runs, 24 steals, 62 60, and hit 209. Young projected for 25 home runs, 27 stolen bases, 71 69, and a 237 average. The Yankees definitely let him play through his struggles. Power speed combos there. Can he be more than a Rougned Odor type?
Yeah, I mean, Odor, that's an interesting one. I wasn't expecting that comparison. I think Volpe, I mean, if you look at just his projections, 2020, 230, he seems okay. I mean, he seems fine. It's like, is he going to be as, is his ceiling that high? I don't know. I mean, it really depends on his average, kind of. Like a 25-25 guy is good, but I don't know if he's gonna, his numbers, like his peripherals, his, kind of like his homer per fly ball is fine, but his ground balls are, high. I mean, he doesn't seem that bad. It's just, and I would draft him for sure. And this is probably around like an MI situation at this point. I think he's likely getting a little bit underdrafted. If I had to say like over or underdrafted, I would say he's probably a little bit underdrafted, but still he's not like, I don't know if his ceiling is much higher than what he just did. I mean, maybe if he has like, like if the Yankees let him run like crazy and he puts up like, 40 steals and he still hits 25-ish homers, even if he hits 225, that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, if we can just get the average up slightly, he can be at 225. Even if we get up to 240, that'd be great. Then there's definite value here. Unfortunately, like a whole lot didn't improve through the season. Like he didn't. There's not a point where you can point to and look like, oh, it kind of clicked right there, and maybe it's coming around. Like he was just kind of up and down all season. Hopefully, he can get the strikeouts under control because I do think there's a little bit more average here to come from him. I hopefully he's not. I don't think he's like a 200, 210 guy for his career. He's still only 22, so give him some time to grow. But yeah, I mean, if you get him as a middle infielder, definitely some upside there. I like that pick in a shallow league, especially where you can kind of replace him with somebody if he does go through some struggles at some point in the season. And then the next guy is kind of the complete opposite of what I just said about Volpe. Dansby Swanson is just, he's just consistent. Last year, 22 home runs, 9 stolen bases, 81-80, and hit 244. You're projected for 25 home runs, 12 stolen bases, 81-85, and a 254 average. Dansby Swanson joins the very rare club of guys who stole less in 2023 somehow, Gray.
I stole less in 2023 as well. But that was with the IRS and the government. You know what? We should talk less about that.
Probably shouldn't say that
I think with Dansby Swanson, he's like a Saberhagen metrics darling. Every other year, he has a great year. Last year was the year when he was supposed to have a bad year. And he did have a bad year. So, you know what? Sticking with that premise that doesn't really hold water, I would say he's good for a good year this year. Yeah. And even if the year isn't great this year, he's probably a 25-ish homer, 10-ish steal guy with, maybe 255 average. So I would say honestly, the shortstops are good. It's a good position. I mean, we probably should have said that up top. It's pretty stacked. I mean, it's not like like I had my issues with Ellie De La Cruz. Xander Bogaerts was a little bit boring, but not bad. And a lot of these guys that we're talking about, like you mentioned in the big picture, but when you look at like Dansby Swanson is like his ADP is around 130 overall for 25, 10 steal, 255. That's not bad at 130 overall. I would happily take it. I think probably you're looking at with like if you can get, more than likely you're going to want a shortstop for your MI. Probably. I mean, that's probably what it's going to come down to. So, Dansby Swanson at this point, hopefully you already have a shortstop. If you don't, I mean, he's fine. Don't get me wrong, but hopefully he's your MI. And if he is your MI, then I happily would I would go there. I'm always in a big picture sort of way. I'm always looking at guys to be like I'm always looking to draft deep positions aggressively. And shortstop are a deep position. So I would happily take like a CJ Abrams as my shortstop and then a Dansby Swanson as my MI. I'd be more than happily to do that. So yeah, I'm fine with Swanson. I have no issue with him really. I think last year was an odd year for him, literally.
I would agree. I think he's due for a little bit of a bounce back. Expect the power to come back. I expect the average to come up. The stolen bases, the speed hasn't gone anywhere. So in theory, he could steal more bases. It just kind of depends on what the Cubs are going to ask him to do, and that's a little bit up in the air with the manager change. So we'll have to keep an eye on the running portion. But yeah, I mean he's very solid. I mean just to throw it out there, give him one of his good average years, and he's basically Bo Bichette. Number
Oh man.
17 is Vaughn Grissom. Last year, he had 102 games in AAA. He had 8 home runs, 13 stolen bases, and hit 330. You have projected for 12 home runs, 26 stolen bases, 72-70, and a 286 average. Finally got traded out of Atlanta where they didn't have a place to play him over to Boston. And Gray, if the Red Sox don't start him, I swear I'm burning it all down. If they start Bobby Dahlbeck and Emmanuel Valdez over him, I'm burning it all down, Gray.
Yeah, I was looking at his ADP and I saw like 380 and then I realized that was from before. And that's not 380 is not his ADP now, but it's still low. It's still at like 240. So that's probably a good 100 picks after where I have them. I mean, everyone loved Vaughn Grisham. Like, I feel like this is kind of like the O'Neal Cruz thing again. Like, everyone loved Vaughn Grisham. Disappointed when he didn't have playing time, and moved on. And now he's in Boston in a great park especially for average, if nothing else. I mean, he can hit, he might hit 50 doubles this year. If so everyone liked him last year, and now this year he's in a good place to actually play, and people are like, nah, I don't really like him anymore. uh, I don't know, man. I like Vaughn Grisham a lot. I think he's, I have him for 12 homers and 26 steals. So, if you just reverse those, if homers and steals are essentially the same, but you reverse them and he has 26 homers and 12 steals, yeah, I mean, he's probably a top, if he does that, I mean, he's probably a top 50 guy overall. I have him, if he does 12 homers and 26 steals and a 286 average as I have him projected, he's way better than Ha-Seng Kim, for instance. I mean, that's 12 homers and 26 steals. He sounds great to me. I really like Vaughn Grisham a lot. And all that talk about really loving the shortstops, that comes to an abrupt end at Vaughn Grisham. I don't really like the shortstops after this point. There's some guys here and there that we'll talk about, but for the most part, that is sort of the end of the shortstops for me.
Yeah, this is kind of your last opportunity to grab one. I like one more guy, but we've kind of already talked about that. We'll get to that here in a second. But yeah, I mean, I love Vaughn Grissom. I agree. Like he's kind of people loved him last year, not really back in on him this year. I will certainly take that discount. I know the 8 home runs, 13 stolen bases isn't necessarily something to write home about from AAA, but I also have to think like he was completely bored. They were really focusing on defense because that was the reason that they sent him down to begin with. Was his defense was we're just gonna say not good and leave it at that. So he had different focuses in the minors. They didn't need to know that he can hit home runs and steal bases because they kind of already knew that about him. So yeah, I love Vaughn Grissom, and
we also don't know. We don't know how Alex Cora is going to use him either.
Yeah, I mean, I know that like if you go to Fangraphs and look at their lineup, he's sitting 8th or 9th in their lineup, but there's a very good chance that he can move up that lineup because Jarren Duran is not exactly a high average, high on base guy. Neither is Tyler O'Neill. I mean, Tyler O'Neill, maybe he's always had it on base, but like you can definitely move on Grissom up there as well. So
yeah, I would say the only like Rafael Devers and Casas at 2-3, that feels pretty locked in more or less, and Yoshida probably at like 5, but the rest of that is completely everything else there can move around. Like the fact that Duran is hitting leadoff, that's like, I mean, that's just one person's guess.
That's literally just penciled in there as we think this might happen.
Yeah, I mean, everyone looks at this projected lineup as gospel, but it's like, yeah, I mean, maybe, but Grisham could easily hit leadoff in that lineup.
Absolutely. So moving on, number 18. This is a new tier, as you mentioned. That was kind of the cutoff for you. I love it, number 18, which is Ha-Seng Kim. If you want to hear about that, you can go listen to the second baseman rankings. Number 19 is Tommy Edman, who we also talked about in that podcast. Number 20 is Willy Adames. Last year, 24 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 73, 80. It hit 217. You're projected for 32 home runs, 6 stolen bases, 75, 89, and 226. He's if we get the average up, he'd be a useful player for us, Gray. The average just kind of buries him in this bottom section though for us.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like, he definitely he hits a ton of fly balls, and his launch angle is, it says that he's probably not going to hit a lot fewer fly balls. And, I mean, with his power, fly balls aren't necessarily a bad thing. It's just that he hits, so many fly balls is going to hurt his BABIP. So last year his BABIP was 259. It's probably not going to come up a ton, maybe to 275. If it comes up to 275 and maybe hits 245, it's, I mean, he is basically what you think he is. He's like a 27 to 32 homer, 5-ish steals, 225 to 235 hitter. More than likely.
I agree. There's not a whole lot to add there. The average can move kind of. We saw 217. We've seen as high as like 262 in a meaningful amount of time. That's all within the range, depending on BABIP a little bit. But the 262 was also in 2021 with the bouncy ball. So just keep that in mind when you're projecting out what you're getting from him. It's going to be home runs and probably not a great average. Moving on is number 21, Jeremy Pena. Last year had 10 home runs, 13 stolen bases, 81, 52, and 263. You have him projected for 15 home runs, 15 stolen bases, 73, 77, and 267. This is the hardest fall for a wonder kid since Nathan Shelley, Gray.
Yeah. I still feel like, Jeremy Pena's his peripherals don't look tremendous. I mean, they don't look
It
great.
looked real bad.
Yeah, they look pretty terrible. I still think he's young enough where maybe, I mean, last year could have been a blip, and he might get back to what he was his rookie year. I think it's possible. I think everyone sort of thought his rookie year was like him hitting a little bit over his head. So when he came down to earth last year, everyone was like, "Yeah, that's likely what he is, really." Like, because I mean, his fly ball rate, 26% fly ball rate, is so bad. I mean, that's really bad. So, I unfortunately, and he doesn't really have great speed. I mean, he has fine. I mean, with the pitch clock, I'm projecting for 15 steals. I think he's probably in that, in that 11, like 10 to 15 steals. I might be on the upper end of his projections for steals, but never. With the pitch clock, I'll always say more steals versus less. But his power is just like even my 15 homers for his power, even that feels like optimistic. Like he really needs to hit. Like Houston's not a terrible park for homers from, especially from righties, but he really needs to elevate the ball a little bit more. And like last year, like I said, like last year was terrible, but guys, maybe it was just a down year. I mean, it was only his second year and he was only 25. It's, I mean, I don't think it's completely absurd to be like, in retrospect, like next year, if we look at his numbers, we'll see, 2023 was just a bad year for him and he bounced back in his third year. I don't think that's a completely crazy thing for him to happen, to happen to him. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily love him, as I mentioned with like Grissom, like that being the end of the shortstops. Obviously, if you're in a deeper league, you have to draft a middle infielder. I mean, I don't necessarily hate Jeremy Pena, like, with all my heart. I don't really want to draft him, but if you're in a deep enough league where you need an MI and you're, in the 250 to 275 ADP range, I think I'm looking at it right now. Well, he's at 225. So, plus or minus 30 spots on ADP. So if he's at like 250 overall and you're in a deep league for an MI, yeah, I mean, it's you can do worse, I guess. I mean, it's like there's a reason why he's not in the top 50 excuse me, in the top 150 overall. I mean, there's a reason why he's ranked all the way down here, but third year player, maybe he bounces back from last year. You would hope, at least.
Yeah, hoping that he can kind of bounce back from that. I think there were probably some obvious things in his profile that people have figured out and are using against him now. But he can also adjust backwards. So yeah, at 26, certainly not the world's over, but definitely fallen quite a bit in ADP from where he was last year, even with everybody thinking he was going to fall off. Had 6 home runs in April, Gray, and then 4 the rest of the season, 0 in August and September. Whatever happened between March and April?
I wonder if there was like I wonder if there was an oblique or something, or like something that caused his launch angle to dramatically change and for him to, fly ball rates to plummet. I wonder if there was something there. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't remember. And
I know he
I
had some
did
kind of neck thing in like June or July, but the numbers pretty
it.
much changed from like April to May. It is possible because he did strike out like a 25% clip in April. Maybe the Astros are like, hey, we need you to be a little less aggressive and tone down the strikeouts. Um, but that led to him being real bad. So maybe there's something here. Maybe it can come around. Not the end of the world if you take him like you get last year's 10-15 with 260. That's not the end of the world, and you still have some room to move up potentially. Number 22 is Carlos Correa. Speaking of former Wonder Kids, Carlos Correa was not the answer to who is the best value shortstop last year. He had 18 home runs, hit 230, 60, 65 on the counting stats. You have down for 20 home runs, 72-70, and a 274 average. He's just not that good, Gray.
I know. It took a while for everyone else to catch up with that fact too. I mean, it was a good 5 years there where people were kind of enamored with Carlos Correa in fantasy, and it never really made any sense. He was overrated for a good 5 years, and I think it was due to defense, which doesn't make any sense. Clearly,
It's
there's no
prospect
reason.
ranking, all that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people can't separate, the prospect ranking when they're ranking for real baseball versus fantasy, and you see it and you're like, well, yeah, he has no speed, kind of middling for power, and his average is like, eh. I mean, there's really, and he can't, and now he can't even stay on the field. So yeah, I honestly, I mean, that's why I have Jeremy Pena in front of Correa. I'm really not a fan of Correa. I, it would be really random for me to draft Correa because I would probably just wait. Like if Correa was at the top of my board for a couple rounds, even I would probably just wait until someone took him and then just grab someone after or something.
I will say, if he does happen to fall in drafts, because he had a bad season last year, having somebody who's going to give you 20, 25 home runs, hit 250, 260, there's worse things that you can get from a shortstop. He's not exciting like he used to be. He kind of came up in the same time frame as Corey Seager, and they were kind of putting up similar lines. You're like, oh, well, they're both going to be great. It turned out Seager was great. Correa was very much just kind of like a league average guy. I mean, that's what we're kind of looking at, right? Like low 20s, 260. Like that's kind of average for at least from our game, what we would look for. But yeah, still some value there depending on if he drops, but that's what you're looking at. You're looking at an ADP pick, not necessarily an upside play anymore. All right, Gray, moving on to number 23. That is JP Crawford. Last year, he had 19 home runs, two stolen bases, 94, 65, and hit 266. You have projected over 15 home runs, three stolen bases, 86, 51, and a 271 average. Career best walk rate, hard hit, average exit velocity, all that put together, he had 19 home runs, Gray.
Yeah. Not great, right? His I haven't looked it up, but his jump in homer per fly ball, that's gotta be one. I mean, for someone who, I guess there's been others, and maybe he's not that rare in that regard, but it feels like it. It feels like a pretty big jump to go from a 4.3 homer per fly ball to a 12.3 like that. Like I mean, there's guys I'm sure that have gone from like say 12 to 20 or something, or 22 or 15 to 25 I feel like after like a 10% homer per fly ball, then you're dealing with like, normal home run hitters. So they could fluctuate a little bit. But when you have a guy who's got under 5% homer per fly ball, and then to go to 12, I mean, that feels like a huge jump. And for him to do that and still only have 19 homers. So, I mean, JP Crawford, right, is like, and maybe the JP stands for Jeremy Pena. We'll think on that. But the JP Crawford feels like the polar opposite of Jeremy Pena, because like Jeremy Pena, he had a down year after his good rookie year. And JP Crawford just had like career best year, but it's still kind of so boring. It's still such a boring. I mean, it's just like it's basically like if you were to take JP Crawford and say like he's going to be out for a 15 game IL because of a hamstring injury or something. Like if you were to do that to JP Crawford, then his counting stats would dip and he'd suddenly be like barely rosterable in a 15 team mixed league or deeper. It's like it'd be, or shallower, I should say, 15 team mixed league or shallower. Now he's only barely rosterable in a 15 team mixed league. So yeah, and that's only because you're expecting counting stats. If you don't expect the counting stats, you're really like you're drafting a real bore.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like a guy we talked about last show in Ahmed Rosario. It feels like the Ahmed Rosario of 2024. Like had a good season, showed some signs that maybe things were changing, and then just like comes back down to what Ahmed Rosario is and is, you know, in reality, that's what this feels like to me. Like this came out of nowhere. He had, I think, like 7 home runs in September, just out of nowhere, that made this kind of really pop out of nowhere. So those go away or just become a normal. You're looking at like 12, 13 home runs, then like that seems very much within his range. Moving on to number 24 is Trevor Story. Last year in 43 games, he had 3 home runs, 10 stolen bases, and hit 203. In 2022, he had 94 games where he went 16, 13, and hit 238. You have him projected for 12 home runs, 20 stolen bases, 45, 51, and a 215 average. I mean, he's shown that when he's on the field, he can still kind of do the power speed thing, but he's not really on the field, and the average is tanked along with that too. So, Trevor Story, Gray.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like he's not only the halfway point between the beginning of the shortstops and my end of the shortstop rankings, but he's also kind of like glass half full versus half empty. Like if you're in on Trevor Story still, you got some optimism, boy. You are an optimistic soul, man. I I wish I had your optimism. I'll tell you, because I see his numbers and I don't know, man. I see like an average tanking, like you mentioned, never being to stay on the field. Like, so basically, if you were to throw out that whole never staying on the field thing and say, okay, Trevor Story is going to stay on the field. I know this for a fact. Like, okay, sure. If you say so. But even if you were to say that, like, I don't know what you're getting here. Like, I think even the best case scenario, if you were to say, 535 at bats, which is hilarious in its own respect. I mean, that's already hilarious. He hasn't done that since 2019. But if you were to say 535 at bats and look at his numbers, I mean, probably like maybe 20 homers. I don't know, 20 homers, 25 steals, and a 215 average. Maybe Like last year is like even with a Babbitt, like now he's going on like his Babbitt is just tanked so bad. He's going on like 3 years now where it's just slowly declining and his batting average is just slowly declining. And he really looks like a 215 hitter now. So even if you're like best case scenario him, I just don't see the average coming up. So, and also the best case scenario assumes his legs stay healthy enough to steal bases. I wouldn't assume it, but okay. And it's saying that he's going to have the power that he showed in Coors in Fenway, which I mean, Fenway is a lot tougher for a righty to hit for power. With the wall or whatever. I mean, it can be. It doesn't have to be like if you elevate the ball, but he's not necessarily like. I mean, if he's elevating the ball, he's not hitting for an average either. It's just like there's so many problems and so many things you have to caveat to get him to like a good bounce back year. It just seems ludicrous, really. I mean, I don't know. I honestly, where his draft price is, fine. If you want to take that flyer in like an AL only league, sure. I mean, go for it. Try it out. But I just don't. I don't see anything really coming of him. Like even if he were to stay on the field, but that sounds. I mean, that's just ludicrous to imagine he's staying on the field.
Yeah, I don't really see that happening. The pop's gone. He can still steal bases, but like you said, like the legs then. I, I mean, if you're Boston, like maybe you just tell him to stop running and just, you know, the only time we need you to run is if you're going to second on a double. Like don't steal. Let's keep you healthy, but it's not a even useful bat to keep in the lineup really for them at this point. So we'll see what happens. I wouldn't bet on a bounce back, but like you said, it's very late, so there's minimal gain or minimal loss at just around 200 or just shy of 200. So it is what it is at that point. Next tier for you is number 25, Michael Garcia. Last year had 4 home runs, 23 stolen bases, 59, 50, and had 272. You have him projected for 6 home runs, 25 stolen bases, 66, 53, and 282. Just kind of a cheap source for steals here, basically, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of like squint real hard and see a potential 10 homer, 25 steal, 275 hitter, which which wouldn't be bad. I mean, that wouldn't be bad what I just described. Yeah, or even like maybe 30 steals. You could squint real hard. Actually, if you I am now seeing stars. I'm squinting so hard, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like probably just cheap steals. At the end of the day, that's probably what you're getting. I don't know. I don't see a ton more. Yeah, he's also got a really bad launch angle for power, and the stadium isn't good, at least in his home game. So yeah, I probably you're probably looking at a 5 homer, 20 steal guy that's hitting ninth. But I mean, if you really get crazy with yourself, you can see a scenario where he hits leadoff because Melendez really shouldn't be hitting leadoff. So he hits leadoff, so he gets 85 runs, gets into a few homers, maybe 7 7 homers, maybe.
That seems that bold.
Probably ludicrous, but and then because he's hitting leadoff, he steals a bunch, and maybe gets into 30 steals. And he's actually, I mean, he does have a good hit tool, so he should hit for a good average. Like that's not like you don't have to, do any sort of magical thinking to get him to a 280 average. But yeah, that's probably where that ends, really.
Yeah, I would agree with pretty much everything you said. The best possibility would be that he gets to somehow sit at the top or 2 spot in the lineup. Power is not there at all. But yeah, average, cheap stolen bases. If that's what you're looking for, that it's there. Luis Rengifo comes in at 26. We talked about him last podcast with second base. Number 27 is Ezekiel Duran. He had 14 home runs, 8 stolen bases, 55, 46, and a 276 average last year. You have him projected for 17 home runs, 10 stolen bases, 61, 58, and a 253 average. I mean, he kind of plays everywhere, but I don't know that he has a full-time job anywhere, Gray.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, because I'm kind of interested in him if he were to have a full time job. It's the thing with him and who we'll talk about with the outfielders, Langford. I don't like people are assuming Wyatt Langford is going to be a starter for the Rangers out of camp. I don't know if that's true. I don't even know, like, unless someone can point to where they've, guaranteed him some sort of starting spot. I haven't seen that, at least. So, the fact that Duran had 122 games played last year makes me think he's at least going to start the year. Like, I would guess he starts the year as their primary DH, and then, like you said, floats around the field with, like, if they have to fill in for an injury or something. You know how I mean, Seager's already hurt, so there's something there. So yeah, I think Duran could get 450 at bats. It may be a case where you have to, like, play it every day. Like, it's like in a daily lineup, it's a little bit easier to manage a guy like that, because you may have to have, like, move him in and out of the lineup depending on when he's playing. But he had a solid year last year as a 24-year-old in, like, 90% playing time duty. Like, he played a decent amount last year. So I guess he's going to play a decent amount again this year. I don't know. I mean, I kind of like him, to be honest. I just don't. I just feel like you have to work with his playing time a bit to figure out when you're going to be able to use him in, like, your fantasy lineup.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a play for a deeper league where you're kind of looking to play those daily swap in and out. And Duran doesn't have like a huge ceiling either, even if he gets all full playing time. So it's kind of a league dependent selection here on Duran. I feel like, unless again he gets a primary playing job, Seager's injury becomes more serious, whatever it is, then it becomes a little bit more interesting. But again, I don't think, at least from my side, I don't see a massive like upside here. But you can still get, I don't know, 20, 23, and 15, which is just fine for something you grab after 300 or 400. Number 28 is Jackson Holiday. Last year, he went through 4 levels in 14 games. In A ball, he had 2 home runs and 3 stolen bases and hit almost 400. In 57 games in high A, he had 5 home runs, 17 stolen bases, hit 314. In 36 games at Double A, he had 3 home runs, 3 stolen bases, and hit 338. And then in 18 games at Triple A, he had 2 home runs, stolen base, and hit 267. I went through all of that just because I'm sure people want to hear us talk about Jackson Holiday. Since, I mean, why wouldn't we talk about Jackson Holiday? He could break camp, Gray. Do you think he is? They say he's going to see time at second base this spring, but I don't really know why.
Right?
Like,
Yeah.
what's the purpose of moving him to second base at all? You have the best, or like a top 3 player on your team for like whatever it's going to be, and you want to move him off his primary position that you don't have anybody for?
I know. That's it. It's funny you say that, because that was sort of my takeaway too immediately. Like, people were excited about hearing that he might play second, because for fantasy at least, people were excited for fantasy because it's like, oh, new eligibility, and it's like, okay, but why is he playing second? I mean, I get it would help his eligibility, but why? what are they doing? Are the Orioles just like trying to make things more difficult for themselves? I don't really understand exactly. I also like as far as him breaking camp. I was more lukewarm on the fact, like I was a little bit more lukewarm before they went out and sold the team and brought in Corbin Burns. So I'm lining up to the idea of him breaking camp. I mean that seems more likely. Why I haven't moved him up in my rankings yet is he just doesn't seem like a super interesting guy for fantasy. Like I feel like he's going to be the guy that everyone loves, like for real baseball, and that carries over to fantasy, and it's like, and it just doesn't really correlate in the same way. I I don't mind him at a certain price in drafts. I would totally draft him. I think actually I have already in a best ball league, but I don't know. I don't see the huge upside, at least for right now. Maybe in a year or two, potentially if he grows into some more power, okay. I don't know, or if he shows that he wants to steal a lot, he doesn't seem like he does. Like he hasn't, at least in the minors, not completely at least. But those are like you mentioned, there was limited time, so that may not mean anything. I mean, he does have good speed, and he's supposed to be able to grow into good power. And he's a lefty, so Camden won't completely kill his power. I like him. I mean, I feel like I might be a little bit more down on him than most people. He seems okay. Like rookies usually disappoint in general. All rookies, mostly, ones that are super overhyped, like Jackson Holiday. But almost all rookies disappoint to a certain extent. You can go back and look at like Mike Trout's rookie year. I mean, he wasn't good his rookie year. He had moments. Acuna was good for sure, but it was still moments. It was nothing like you're seeing now. It's not like you're gonna like Corbin Carroll. I think was one of the rare exceptions. And then
I mean, we
what
had
call
Corbin
it?
Carroll and Gunnar
And
Henderson and
Gunnar
McLean and
Henderson. Yeah, I mean,
Nolan Jones and James Outman. I mean, last year was a really good
well,
year
well,
for rookies.
last year was a particularly exceptional year, but Corbin Carroll, like, not to go totally off off topic here, but Corbin Carroll has
We're already
a
on the
skill
topic.
set that is incredibly good for fantasy. I mean, he's really good for fantasy. Corbin Carroll, Corbin Carroll is built like in a lab to please like a fantasy person. That is totally what you want for fantasy. And I don't think Jackson Holiday has that necessarily. Jackson Holiday will hit for a better average. He could hit the ground running as far as average goes, but like if he were to hit 5 to 7 homers, steal 15 bags, and hit 285, I think the Orioles would take that as a huge success. And for fantasy, it's not so great. I mean, it's just like, it's not as good as he's getting drafted at least. I wouldn't be shocked to see him even next year go at barely inside the top 100 when people start to see his tools in action when it comes to fantasy. I mean, he might be a little bit overrated, but I just don't see the power coming on this quickly. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's bulked up in the offseason and he comes out and he hits, 20 plus homers and steals 25 bags and hits 285. I mean, the average should be there. I don't know if the rest of it's going to be there. So, yeah, I'm pretty lukewarm on him, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from. There's not like massive home run stolen base numbers when you go look at like the profile here, but or at least in like the production that he had last year. But moving up 4 levels in a single year, hitting well across 4 levels. Like pretty ridiculous as a 19-year-old. And he's going so late in regards to ADP. Like, what are you like? Even if he doesn't really get it going or whatever, like he's not what we think he can potentially be down the road. Like at 200 or just after 200, I mean, I don't mind that. I would say that if we're just looking at pure upside, I mean, we've been talking about boring guys for the last, I don't know, 45 minutes probably since we got through Von Grissom and skipped over Ha-Sung Kim. Like, those were the last two interesting guys we talked about. And that was, 8, 9 spots ago. So
If you were to take his, I mean, his ADP right now is 190. So that's from mid-January to the taping of this, which is February 8th. So it's a couple weeks, but I think it's enough of a sample size. So it's 195 is his ADP right now. If you were to take me out of the equation and just look at everyone else's projections for him, like you see like numbers of 10 homers, 10 steals, 255. I think that's probably being a little bit down on his average. What he could do is, that's essentially all projections are saying a similar thing. None are saying anything like really that interesting as far as projections go. So even if you take me out of it, you're looking at a guy who's like barely a top 300 overall type fantasy value guy going inside the top 200 on name value.
I mean, again, inside the top 200 isn't a high cost for him. We're just going to move on from this one. I think he's obviously capable of a lot. I would agree in general. If he doesn't break camp, you probably don't have a use for him. But if he doesn't break camp, he has to be on like the old school like Chris Bryant timeline. He'll be up in a month, give or take, once they kind of figure out the time part. I really like him. I guess I'm a little bit higher on him than you, but it is what it is. We'll move on. If he gets a job and they say he's going to break camp, I'm probably even moving him up even further. And I would expect ADP to climb a decent amount if that happens as well. Number 29 is Mason Wynn. Last year, 37 games at the major league level. He had 2 home runs, 2 stolen bases, and hit 172. In AAA, he had 105 games, hit 18 home runs, 17 stolen bases, and hit 288. Young projected for 8 home runs, 18 stolen bases, 41, 45, and 258, and 388 at bats. So it looks like either you're projecting some kind of time split or that he's not starting the year up here, Gray.
Yeah, no, I'm just being conservative with the at bats. I don't know. Hopefully he gets the job and runs with it. He looked terrible in his short time in the majors. I think he's got a possibility in spring training. Like if in spring training, if he hits like 150, they may be like, what are we doing? He needs more time in the minors. Like I think he's going to break camp. I think he's super talented. I like him. But I mean, he did hit 172, even if it was limited time. If he hits 172 in spring training, they're not gonna say like, okay, he's our guy, let's go. I mean, they're probably gonna be like, maybe it's a little bit too soon. Let's let him, figure out some stuff in AAA. I mean, you never know. I don't know. It's adding a little bit of just being a little bit cautious with his projections. So yeah, I mean, I'm guessing he breaks camp, but there's obviously some risk involved. With that said, he's probably like for fantasy wise, I mean, he's probably a better bet as far as fantasy stats like power and speed than Jackson Holiday for just 2024. I mean, it's like, who knows, going forward in, a year or two, Jackson Holiday may be like, he may be Corey Seager by, 2026. But as of right now, I think, yeah, I mean, I think Mason Wynn probably has more upside, like realistic upside for power and speed. And oddly enough, he's going, I think, like 200 picks after Holiday in drafts. So, yeah, if you want to take a flyer on Mason Wynn, I got no problem with it. I mean, I don't hate this tier for upside gambles. I just think there's like, they are absolutely gambles though. I don't think they're really like locks in any way. So yeah, I mean, I would try Mason Wynn if it was late and it was a NL only league, or even a 15 team mixed league, and you want a bench bat that's a possible gamble for upside. Sure, I mean, I don't mind it. It's late though for, I think, Mason Wynn. Is, the key is his draft price.
He's going. I mean, he's going undrafted basically. I mean, when you're talking about in the 400s, so yeah, I don't mind the shot there. I think there's probably more chance if they both come out of the gates with the team. I think there's more chance we see Wynn demoted, because I think once Jackson's up, like, he's not going back down. He's that good. I don't see him hitting like 150 at any point for a long stretch and getting
No,
sent
and
back
that's
down.
also, I put Holiday above Wynn in the rankings. Holiday's much safer if he's up, for sure. Yeah, I don't think Wynn is necessarily that safe if he does anything close to what he was doing last year, which was really bad. He could absolutely step up though. I mean,
But I mean, there's
again,
huge tools.
yeah, there's huge tools, right? I mean, it's like, it's so funny that like these guys, like if you were to draft, Mason Wynn at 450 overall in a 15 team league as a bench bat, it's like, okay, sure. But if he were to go undrafted and he comes up the second week of the season, he's going to go for like 300 in fab. It's going to be like, well, why didn't you just draft him? Why are you spending, a third of your fab budget on a guy who you could have just drafted him? But that's how it goes with these guys.
It is, and you can't draft them all. Believe me, I've tried, and you can't draft all of the prospects that are high upside, unfortunately. But you take a couple here and there, and hope that you don't miss out on the one that actually breaks out, or drop 70% of your fab on a month into the season. These things happen. It is what it is, though. Sometimes, sometimes it's tough out here. But like you said, I mean, it can happen in any way. Like, I don't know, like Vlad at one point, obviously was the top prospect across the board, but his rookie year, like, of all things, of all people, like, Keston Hura had a better season than Vlad did his rookie year. Doesn't
Right,
really mean anything long
exactly.
term, but it's
Yeah.
it's your rookie season. You kind of hit the ground running, or you struggle. That's unfortunately how it goes.
Right. Yeah, no, totally.
All right, moving on. Number 30 is Jordan Lawler. Last year in Double A in 89 games, he had 15 home runs, 33 stolen bases, 77, 48, and hit 263. In Triple A, he had 5 home runs and 3 stolen bases and hit 358 across 16 games, very small sample size. And then he had 14 games in the majors and hit 129. I'm sure he would like to forget about the 129 part. But hey, you got 14 games at the majors. That's got to be a nice experience at the end of the year. I mean, how long do you expect them to keep Lawler down? He doesn't have the feel of the last two in regards to, like, definitely has the option to break camp. But I guess he could. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that's like, like that's sort of this whole group of players though. Like Lawler absolutely doesn't have the same feel as the last two guys, but also if Perdomo looks like crap in spring training and Lawler is hitting 400 in spring training, they'd be dopes to not start the season with Lawler. Like, it'd be like, what are you guys? People would honestly, it'd be one of the stupidest moves if Lower doesn't break camp, if he's hitting well in spring training, because especially nowadays with the new CBA, like you get draft picks if a guy wins the if he starts the year with the team and he
Rookie of
wins
the
rookie of
year.
the year. So yeah, I mean if he looks good in spring, I could absolutely see him break camp, you know? So it's like, yeah, I mean, these are just rolls of the die. If you're feeling lucky with Lawler, I'm fine with it. I think he could honestly, for 1 year at least, he could be better than Jackson Holiday in that year, 2024 could be that year. Like you mentioned his numbers in Double A, he hit 15 homers and stole 33 bags. He hit 358 in Triple A. He's not. It's not like he's a slouch.
No,
Remember
definitely not.
when he came up, everyone was like, "Oh my God!" You know, that's everyone was going crazy for him when he first came up last year. So yeah, I mean, he could absolutely be a superstar. So yeah, I'm fine with the Flyer super late. He's probably. I mean, I don't even know where he's going. He's probably even going later than Mason Wynn.
He's actually going a good bit in front of, well, I would say a good
Oh,
bit, 60
okay.
picks in front of
Okay, yeah.
Win.
All right, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, at least in the player order, 60. When you get down towards the bottom, like the average draft pick doesn't really matter as much just because
Right.
of the big
Yeah,
differences. But yeah,
you just draft whoever you want really.
yeah.
After like a certain point, it's like who cares?
You got your roster, you got your backups in case of injuries. Yeah, you're finding some things to take shots on, or have some safe players if that's what your league calls for. Number 31 is Zach Neto. Last year in 84 games in the majors, had 9 home runs, 5 stolen bases, and hit 225. I'm not going to go through his minors. He only played 11 games last year in the minors. Young projected for 16 home runs, 12 stolen bases, 61, 67, and 256. He came up. He was okay. I mean, 225 is not exactly sparkling. He is projected at the bottom of the Angels lineup right now. Yeah, there, Greg. Hello, hello.
Right. Sorry, you froze on me. I
Okay,
probably froze on you.
that's okay. I'll just start Neto over again.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, number 31 is Zach Neto. Last year at the major league level, he had 84 games, 9 home runs, 5 stolen bases, and hit 225. He only had 11 games in the minors, so kind of not worth bringing those numbers up. But you have him projected for 16 home runs, 12 stolen bases, 61, 67, and a 256 average. I mean, there's definitely some room for improvement here from Neto. Should have a job, but unfortunately, looks like he might be buried in the bottom of a not very good Angels lineup.
Yeah, I could see that, but he also, I mean, if you're to believe Rengifo is going to be their leadoff hitter from opening day until the end of the year, I mean, that's also kind of that
The
seems a little
platoon, the former platoon guy.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I don't know. I mean, honestly, Nito didn't really strike me as much of anything when I was going through the projections for myself, and then I started looking at projections from other people, and it's like Steamer loves Neto. Like, there is some projections for Neto are like really good. So I don't know. Take that for what it's worth. I don't necessarily agree, but I mean, I'm not exactly the most brilliant person when it comes to projections. I mean, there's better projections than mine, as people say. So yeah, I mean, I like Neto. I just don't. He just doesn't really excite me much. But if you look at, yeah, I mean, if you look at other people's projections, like you're looking at like a guy who supposedly is going to hit, close to 25 homers, steal 10 bags, and hit 250, which, it's not bad.
Well, that's not bad at all. I personally don't see that happening, but I do think there's some room for growth here. He kind of went. I don't know. He had one big month, I guess. It was kind of it's definitely top heavy towards the beginning, and then fell off at the end of the season. So we're gonna see what happens with Neto, but again, it's kind of a guy who should have playing time, and the Angels lineup is anything but set. I mean, again, we're talking Rengifo at the top, who's a switch hitter who's been platooned in his career. We're Brandon Drury, Mike Trout, Anthony Rendon, none of who have played a full season, and I don't know. Taylor
Also,
Ward,
they
who
have they Ron Washington's there, so they have a new manager. So he may want to put his own, spin on things. I mean, it's all unknown. This is like this projected lineup for the Angels. As far as like Fangraphs roster resource. I mean, it's just a guess. No one knows what this lineup's going to look like. Taylor Ward could hit leadoff. Nolan Chanel could hit leadoff. Nito could hit leadoff. Yeah, no one has any idea.
Mike Trout could hit leadoff. Who cares? Like, whatever.
Good.
Let's get him at bats.
Yeah.
Let's
Mike
just
Trout
his
could hit.
number.
Mike Trout could hit leadoff, and then have Mike Trout put on a wig, and he could hit second, and then put on a different wig. He could hit third, and put on a different wig. I mean, when you got Mike Trout and no one else in your lineup, you kind of want to use him.
As much as possible there. I mean, who knows? With Ron Washington, he could just be like, "Oh, Nito, I'm going to put him first. I like that name, Nito." It's Nito to start the game that way.
Ron Washington could be like, he could take his pixie straw and go, "Whoa, Nito."
One. All right, let's go. All right, let's go. Great. Number 32, Ezekiel Tovar, 15 home runs, 11 stolen bases, 79, 73, and a 253 average last year. Year projected for 14 home runs, 12 stolen bases, 74, 75, and a 251 average. I mean, this is another home Rockies player, but Tovar was better than I think anybody expected him to be, and I mean, at least has NL only value here for sure.
Yeah, no, he's one of those players that has probably more value than the rankings or ADP are gonna show. Like he has real value. Is it exciting? No, I don't think it's exciting. I think he's like J.P. Crawford with maybe a little bit of upside and probably a little bit of downside. But yeah, I mean he's fine for like NL only. Excellent. He's actually a perfect guy for NL only because he's going to go for only a couple of bucks, and he's going to be in the lineup, and he's pretty decent for he's good for defense. He's excellent on the field, so he's going to stay in the lineup because of that. So yeah, I mean he does very little though exciting offensively, unfortunately. Even in Coors, I mean, it's like, it's okay. It's fine. For NL only, that's great. For like a mixed league, for a 12-team mixed league, it's really boring. So if you're in a 15-team mixed league, yeah, I mean, that's fine if you really punted MI. But yeah, for the most part, he's kind of a boring guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I could squint here and see Bo Bichette Gray. I mean,
Ooh.
I mean, let's just be clear here. Just saying. Only 50 spots apart in the player rater from last year. That's
my
not
God.
a huge
Leave Bo. Please leave Bo Bichette alone.
Right. Number 33 was Bryce Terang. We talked about him at second base. We're going to. Oh, hold on. You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, right. Everything kind of freaked out on me there for a second. So it was my turn to freak out, for my computer to freak out. Okay. All right. So, yeah, we've talked about 33 shortstops here. The position is fairly deep in regards to its top heavy, and there's guys that you can obviously take some shots on late that we've talked about. However, we've now crossed the line into, oh my goodness, I really hope that we don't have to play these guys. So let's just pick a few here from from what's left. I mean, there's a few boring veterans who kind of look real washed that we could talk about. Or I mean, who do you want to discuss that's left here, Greg?
Uh, okay. There's not.
So
I mean, there's
exciting.
not a ton. There's Marco Luciano, I got. Yeah. I mean, Marco Luciano. So he looks like he could be the Giants' shortstop, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's what they're saying, right? Are they still saying that? This is. I mean, there
I
is.
think
Oh
so.
my
I mean,
God,
they haven't said
Alberto
anything or cited
Mondesi's
anyone
still
yet.
left.
Oh yeah, I mean, I mean, I had
Alberto Mondesi,
I was waiting.
please.
Yep. I mean, other than that, Gray. I mean, who else? Who else are you looking at down here? Anybody that's worth even taking a flyer on if you need just production from middle infielder?
Have I mentioned Alberto Mondesi? um, yeah. I don't know. Oswaldo Cabrera. I mean, he's there. He's on the Yankees. I mean, that's something. At one point, people were interested in him. So yeah, maybe. There's not. I mean, there's not really a ton of guys here. We've covered a lot, and the other guys we've sort of covered in the second baseman ranking. So yeah, there isn't a lot here.
There's not. Brooks Lee and Jet Williams are a couple more prospects that could potentially get a chance to come up at some point. I don't expect either to break camp, but a couple of names to maybe put on your radar as the season goes on. But as you mentioned,
Oh, so okay, wait. So there's one. Sorry, Jose Caballero. If you're in a AL only league, there's potential there, I guess. I mean, he has some speed. AL only. I mean, that's something in an AL only. And at one point, I believe Rodolfo Castro was, he was interesting a little bit. This is really stretching for decent guys. have I mentioned Alberto Mondesi?
I will also bring up Orlando Arcia. He magically stayed healthy last year, and if he can magically stay healthy again, he's basically J.P. Crawford, like for free. So another guy, if you're just ignoring injury and previous playing time and what's happened in the past, another guy that could potentially be a late, just give you some contribution at the position. That's all I got, Gray.
Is Orlando Arcia that different than Bo Bichette?
He's not really. Okay, I wasn't gonna go there, but if you wanna bring it up, then yeah, I mean, not too different.
Oh, this is a tough podcast in,
Just
in a
gonna
lot of
keep.
fronts.
Yeah, this has been a challenging one, but we're done, Greg. We've got shortstop in the
All
bag. Audio
right,
recording
yeah.
issues aside, it's all done. I'm gonna have fun putting this one together and post. That'll be an enjoyable experience. If you have any questions, comments, if you want in any of the leagues, come find us on Twitter. I'm at RazBeaton. Gray is, of course, the owner of the at Razzball account. If you want to watch us and just see the expressions and how many times a show our screens freeze, you can go out there and watch us on youtube.com/Razzball Fantasy. Subscribe, listen, rate, review, all of that helps. Great. Until we get to third base next week, I'll talk to you later. Enjoy the Super Bowl, everybody.
All right, let's.